online session. We skipped the one for February, but you're invited. If you want to join us, there is a number that I will post. Then you can continue to see the online presentation.
Shalom, brothers and sisters. Mungu ni mwema na kila wakati. Asanani oye. Wazi. And while we are here in the presence of our Lord, in the blessed sacrament, my Jesus, tupatie trophy. So as Father Victor has mentioned, we were here in December. And we did a bit of an introduction into what we call the plan of life, right? What the church, through many of her centuries, has called the plan of life, right? But one thing we did was that we tried to break it down into these four areas, into things to do with the body, into things to do with the mind, into things to do with the soul, and into things to do with the heart. And when we speak about the plan of life, we're speaking about, as a Catholic, how can I grow in each of these four areas so that I can more and more resemble Christ, so that I can more and more resemble Him who is reserved with us here in the Blessed Sacrament. So we had already looked at the soul last year, more or less. We were supposed to look at things to do with the heart, so emotions, mental health, etc. The guest got caught up. It was supposed to be an online session, I think mnakumbuka, but this is the one that Father Victor is saying has been postponed. We will have it, I think, at the end of this month. But we also wanted to try and remember one or two things that we had said last year. Sijui kama mnakumbuka. If this was a class, ningewauliza one by one, but now that we are not in a class, acha tuendelee tu hivi. So we tried comparing the two of them to the plan of life to a training regime in sports, for example. And we were trying to draw some analogies. So we said, in my experience in sports, in nikiwa Raima, nikiwa Seko, especially in team sports, I would say these are the three pillars of what bring a good team together, what makes a good team. Number one, that you have things called team meetings, when one person will speak, usually the coach, and he will give everybody the game plan, complete theory. Alafu kutoka hapo ndio saa mnafika on the pitch and you have drills. So exercises, specific exercises that the coach says, in order to put that game plan, tulikuwa tumeongelelea hiyo, in order to put it into practice, we need to repeat certain exercises over and over. So tuseme when you're a winger and we want to work on counter-attacks, like a certain team from Manchester has been doing, then we are going to need you to run down the wing for the whole 90 minutes bila kuchoka. And if we are going to work on parking the bus, then all of us have to kind of rehearse and repeat until we can't get it wrong. So the team meetings are theory. The drills are very specific exercises that we repeat over and over again until you can't get them wrong. And they are designed to try and help us achieve what was in the theory, in that game plan. And then finally you have a coach, a personal trainer, or if you're in an individual sport, like swimming, for example, would be a personal trainer, not so much a coach, right? So these were the three kind of pillars, and we're trying to compare them now to the plan of life. And in the plan of life, it sits down and explains the theory, the game plan. When you that means what you could collectively, for example, this. Speaking, the rest listen. We have the drills. So on the pillars are specifically to help us achieve certain things in the game plan. So similarly speaking, these practices of piety are the ones that we will repeat over and over and over again in order to achieve the ideals, the theories that we have been given in the means of formation, right? Sometimes in some circles within the church, they're called the norms of the plan of life, right? And then finally, you have your spiritual director. You have that one person who speaks to you as an individual. I'm trying to kind of tailor the talk to as many people as possible. But your needs and my needs are not the same thing. Your strengths are not my strengths, and my weaknesses are not yours. So at some point in time, we have to come down to the individual. How do I deal with my specific challenges, or with my specific call that God has given to me, or with my specific circumstances, situation, etc., etc. So that's now where the coach comes in and anakwambia, for you specifically, you need to do more of this, or you need to do less of that, as the case might be, right? Okay. Then this was just a bit of a suggestion as to what these team meetings or means of formation could be for us as Catholics in our plan of life. There could be some kind of talk in my parish, or maybe I meet with other young professionals somewhere. We have a group, and once a week we try and get a guest or somebody, or just some good ideas to give us a bit more of that theory. We have the monthly recollections that are being organized in very many parishes, and then we have the yearly retreats that I think are also very popular. And then the practices of piety that we mentioned last December, topmost is always the Mass, what we are going to have after this. Nothing beats the Mass. Mass is the most important thing. Hadi kwa hiyo group tuko nayo on WhatsApp venye Father Victor alikuwa anaongea. The push there really has been, and for me has been very inspiring, kusema kweli. Just how much people have been making, young people, young Catholic adults have been making that effort to attend daily Mass. That's wonderful, right? And people have been sharing their reflections and quotations from saints, etc., etc. And then you have mental prayer. That time you sit with Jesus present in the Eucharist, and you speak to him and tell him whatever it is you want about your relationships, about Jobo, about sports, about finances that are a difficulty, or this person who's a pain, etc., etc. And then you also have other traditions in the church that recommend reading from the New Testament, reading a spiritual book, usually written by a saint, describing their own experiences in this same journey. Mortifications, which basically is about self-denial. As Christians, as Catholics, that's one of the ways in which we identify ourselves with Jesus on the cross, right? That we also try and consciously, purposefully look for things that make my life a bit uncomfortable, right? So tuseme tunaenda sherehe and I have a chance to take my favorite beer. Okay, I'll take my second favorite beer. Mbona? Well, because I want to deny myself something small and kind of offer that in union with Christ on the cross. So that the mortifications, for example, yeah? And then what we want to spend time on tonight has to do with that coach, that individual attention that all of us need and that the church offers us in very many, you could say, packages, if you want to call them that, right? So the spiritual accompaniment or the spiritual director. Last December there are usually three main ways of breaking that down. You could have a lay friend who's a bit of like an accountability partner to congelea story, a confession, which is super important, and then now the spiritual direction per se. So from here on, for the next 15 or so minutes, I just want to kind of explode this one screen, so that we can go into a bit of detail of what are the different ways in which I could have a bit of a personal trainer, a bit of spiritual direction, etc. At the back of this basilica, there is one of the images of a saint there, like we have around here. His name is Saint Josemaria Escriva. And one of the things that he would mention is all of us Christians can and should be not just other Christs, but Christ himself. And we gave examples of this last month. Tukasema, we shared that story of Mother Teresa, you remember, where she was taking care of this person who was dying, who was a Hindu, had heard about Jesus, but nothing very, very clear. And after Mother Teresa took care of this guy for a few days, akamuliza, you know, are you Jesus? And Mother Teresa was a bit shocked. Why? She said, I've had one or two things kusuhum say bana, and you seem to fit that description. It should be the same for you and for me. People should honestly be confused. Are you Jesus? Are you really Jumaze venye unapika hizo chapo bana? Only Jesus can cook like that bana, right? Or the way you play sports, or the way you take care of your boyfriend, or the way you take care of your mother, or the way you pray, or the way you work in the office, or the way you hustle uko nje bana. That just sounds like the way Jesus would do things. So this is more or less what he is speaking about there. There was another Catholic apologist from France, Leon Bloy, who would say, the only real sadness, the only real failure, the only great tragedy in life is not to become a saint. Kumaanisha, in a number of years' time, we should have your picture huku juu. Saint Mutisia, patron saint of Arsenal supporters, for example, right? Or Saint Kevo, patron saint of Sawanganya, match drivers, for example. This is what we are aiming for, all of us, very sincerely. And we say this in front of our Lord in the Eucharist, that my Jesus, I really want to become like you and I have, but they made it. And the reason they've been put up there is examples. And that is what Jesus is calling you to, that is what Jesus is calling me to be a saint. The greatest tragedy in life is not to become a saint. Vince Lombardi was a famous coach in American football in the States. And one of the things he would say is the quality of a person's life is in direct proportion to their commitment to excellence, regardless of their chosen field of endeavor. Tuseme unaweza meitwa hapa hivyo kwa Lamu, or you're a farmer, or you just hustle online. Kazi yako you give tuition, or you write papers online, or you are a teacher, or I'm still a student. The quality of your life is in direct proportion to your commitment to excellence, whatever you're doing. Hata kama umeambiwa mazee, this week jumuiya ya sijui akina nani ndio inafagia chapel ama church ama parish. The way you fagia that floor is where we see your commitment to excellence, is where we see the quality of your life. G.K. Chesterton will say something similar, in the sense of trying to encourage us to keep aiming high, to want to be a saint, to want to be identified with Christ, to be like Christ. He would say, keep before your eyes the supreme adventure of virtue. I would add here even of grace. What we get with Jesus, what we get with the Holy Spirit. Keep before your eyes the supreme adventure of virtue. If you are brave, think of a man who was braver than you. If you're brave, think of a man who was braver than you. One of the people who come to my mind precisely is Akina Saint Kizito, Saint Charles Luanga, and I saw them somewhere. I say, yes, Saint Matthias Mulumba was 54 years old. 54! Perhaps had one of the worst sufferings among all the Uganda martyrs that we know. If you're brave, think of a man who was braver than you. Think of a woman who was braver than you. If you're kind, think of a man who was kinder than you. Somebody who took care of other people around. We have Saint Mother Teresa there, right? We have Saint Dominic, who did a bit more of teaching. Think of them. These are the saints. These are the stars in the sky who show us the way to heaven, who help us on that way to heaven. This is what was meant by having a patron saint. Jina yani ulibandikwa ukibaptiziwa ama ukipata confirmation. That person you're named after is not just to be able to fill out a certificate to say, yes, I was baptized Catholic. Mimi ni Katoliki. That was not the point. Right? In fact, I remember there was a Swahili teacher I had in high school. Church bothers to give you a name when you're baptized. Why do they insist on like a Christian name? Bona siwezi baptiziwa Omondi, I baptize you in the name. And he gave a very simple answer. He said, look, every family, when a child is born in that family, he's given a name of somebody else in that family. And many cultures, many traditions have a system of naming. If you're the firstborn son, you'll be named after your father's father. If you're the firstborn daughter, you'll be named after your father's mother, etc., etc. Similarly speaking, in the family of the church, when you are born in that family, you are given the name of one of the people in that family. Fortunately, you can choose. Useme mazee, mimi nataka kuitwa Blaze juu, tembea chuo hapo hivyo, alafu mademo niuliza, hey bro, unaitwaje? Nasema Blaze. Wanasema, oh, okay, wait, you can choose. Okay? But you're given a name of somebody in that family. This gentleman used to coach us rugby to a high school. One of the things he would repeat was, if you haven't needed help, you haven't challenged yourself enough. Ka bado kwa hiyo level ya I got this, niko tu sawa, I think I can manage on my own, etc. You're not aiming high enough. And I like to use the examples of these athletes. Messi, Hamilton, Omanyala. I didn't have space for Ronaldo, wase wa R7 poleni, but screen ilikuwa ndogo kidogo. So Messi, Hamilton, Omanyala, or even the women, Serena Williams, Faith Kipyegon as well. Do all of these people have coaches, trainers, managers? Yes. Can you tell me that Faith Kipyegon's trainer runs faster than she does? No. Maybe sahi akona kitambi na kipara huku, mazee amezeeka. Maybe in his heyday, kitambo akiwa seko ama akiwa kampo, he used to. Did he? For all we know, no. Clearly not as many medals or championships or records like she has. Then why does she, super intelligent, super successful lady, put herself under a coach who's not as good as her? And the same applies to all of these guys. Serena Williams, her coach was her dad for many years. Guy never, won any serious tennis tournaments like she did. Or if you think of Omanyala, he runs faster than his trainer. Hamilton drives better than his manager. And Messi has had many coaches. None of them, we could argue, has ever played as well as he does, etc. But all of these successful people, men and women, have put themselves under a coach of one description or another. Now, I hope with that you can understand these words in a bit of a different light. If you haven't needed help, you haven't challenged yourself enough. Na weze kama uniambie, mazee, but who coach mazee ananibo, or I am, especially si wanaume, tunasemanga, juu ya hiyo kiburi tuko nayo, tunasemanga, but see I'm better than you, mazee unaniambia nini? Nyamaza bana. No. Even these guys, even though they are better, they have those coaches, they have those trainers, they have those managers. And they listen to them. And one of the reasons I would argue they are so successful is precisely because they listen to them. Same thing applies to you, same thing applies to me in our spiritual life. When speaking about accompaniment, when we're speaking about spiritual direction, when speaking about accountability partner. Without an architect, you wouldn't think of building a good house for your life on earth. How then, without a director, without a spiritual director, can you ever hope to build the castle of your sanctification for your eternity in heaven? How? In the list, we usually tunaingia tu chat GPT, look for some advice. How should I invest? What should I do? how do I prepare this better? How do I become more buff or fitter or whatever it is, right? And we look for advice around, why don't we do the same with our spiritual lives? Why? We need to, right? Wikipedia has this kind of description about spiritual direction that I found kind of is a good summary. It says that spiritual direction is a practice of being with people as they attempt to deepen their relationship with God, or to learn and grow in their personal spirituality. The person seeking direction shares stories of their encounters of God, or how they are cultivating a life attuned to spiritual things. The director listens and asks questions to assist the directee in his or her process of reflection and spiritual growth. That coach, that spiritual coach, that spiritual trainer is there to accompany you, accompany me as we are making our journey towards becoming identified to Christ. That's what he's there for, that's what she is there for, right? I have a friend of mine who is a QS. He would summarize that whole story and say that the purpose, the mission, the objective of your coach, spiritual mentor, spiritual accountability partner is to comfort the afflicted and afflict the comfortable. Akikuona ushale anza kulegea hivi mazee anakwambia hapana, no, that we cannot. Hiyo nimekataa. And he puts pressure on you to up your game. And when things are hard and things are difficult and you're going through a tough time for one reason or another, okay, he's there to kind of console and aid you. It's kind of both, right? This is the way he would look at it. So when we speak about the body, mind, soul, and heart, it is possible to have a coach for each of them separately, or to have one guy who looks at everything overall. It's possible. You decide for yourself, depending on where you are in your life, depending on what it is that you're aiming for, right? You get to decide. You could have somebody singularly for your body, singularly for your mind, your soul, your heart. So body, things physical; mind, things professional, the career I have chosen, etc. Things of the soul, the spiritual life; things of the heart, things to do with mental health and the emotions, etc. Okay? So let's look at these things in a bit more detail, and with this we finish today's talk. So for the body, you could have a sports coach or a fitness coach, depending on your interest, depending on your skills. Juu kuna wase wengine wazee hata tuambie tu kweli, just stick to watching football or handball or something like that. Achieni hao wengine, because we have no skill at all. Right? But there are some of us who are interested in finding a way of keeping fit, etc. I remember in this group we had for Plan of Life, there were guys who were also sharing videos and techniques on how to keep fit and warm up and dumbbells na sijui vitu zingine sijaisikia. So that's one possibility. You could have just one person for that, fantastic. If you want it, no problem. You could have a professional mentor in the career that you have chosen, with the ambitions that you have, the kind of business you want to start or already in. Well, I look for somebody who has more experience than I do, who seems to be more successful than I am. Alafu naenda namuliza, hey, cheki bro, mazee, do you think you could be my mentor? Juu mazee, mi hapa hivi ni tu trial and error bana. Right? And I think I will waste much less time. Instead of learning from my own errors, can I learn from yours? Tell me, what should I do, what shouldn't I do, how do I improve, how do I grow, etc. All right? You could also have spiritual direction through confession. Confession is a very personalized sacrament. Ukienda hapo hivyo, piga magoti mbele ya priest, umwambie, Father, I have sinned, forgive me, and he asks you, okay, what is it that you wish to confess? And we mention all of those very shameful sins that we have fallen into for the millionth time in our life. Usually he will give you advice specifically for you. It's different from when the priest is speaking up here in the homily. That one is for everybody at a go. But in confession you get personalized attention, especially if you're able to go to the same priest. So tuseme parish kuna father fulani who's been posted there, and you're able to, because you have a good relationship and you can, well, keep going to him for confession, maybe until anaposiwa kwingine. But if it's possible, try and go to the same priest. Unajua saa zingine mazee hizo dhambi tuko nazo zinakuanga za aibu. and we are looking for a visiting priest, msee ametoka Nigeria, sijui amepitia parish, and does barely speaks English, and you're like, acha niende confession na huyu juu mazee, ai bana. Will the confession be valid? Yes. Will my sins be forgiven? Yes. But you do not get that personalized attention. Joe msee akujui, and you're not going to hear or see him again, etc. Right? So if possible, try and go to the same place. Sometimes it's not possible. Usually you go at a fixed day at a fixed time, and sometimes the schedule of priests who's in the confessional changes. Na hata ujui kuna nani uko ndani. Fine. But if you can't go to the same priest. So that's one side of things. And on this other side, I had thought of putting an accountability partner, so a friend of yours, Kani Dame, Kani Charlie, who understands what you're aiming for. You guys are friends, and for that reason he understands, or she understands, what is it that you're aiming for? What kind of woman are you trying to be? What kind of man are you aiming to be? What kind of Catholic do you want to be? And you have your own resolutions. They are the things that you yourself want to do. I want to be praying the rosary every week. I want to see if I can improve in the way I hustle or do my work, etc. You know, and you give him, these are the resolutions. I want to be doing TZ tuseme atakani mara mbili kwa wiki, you know, and he's the one who you kind of report to and say mazee hii wiki bana, tricky. You know, that's the accountability partner. It's a lay person, just a friend who you're free with, but understands what you're doing and has the common sense to be able to hold you to that, to your word, more or less. That's what we are speaking about there. And then you also have what in some circles is called the weekly chat or the weekly confidence or the weekly conversation. So basically it's deeper. Accountability basically means I tell you what my resolutions are and you help me to achieve them. In the weekly chat or weekly conversation, also with an experienced layperson, it's not me who, I don't tell you what I want. You tell me from outside, mazee venye vitu zinakaa sahi, you need to work more on this area or on that area. You need to work more a bit on self-denial, or you need to solve this problem in your family. You need to go speak to your dad, or you need to go speak to your mom, or this thing in situation in the office, maybe you need to stand up and do something about it, or the case might be, kind of thing. So the weekly chat, I would say, is a bit deeper, broader, and the one who's receiving, listening to you, open your heart to them, is the one who tells you what they think you should do, what's the best direction you should take at this point in time so that you can become more identified with Christ. It could be something weekly, it could be something monthly, it could be something every 2 weeks, depending on your circumstances. You get to choose. And then you have the spiritual direction with a priest. Preferably, if you can, at least once a month. You go to that priest you have chosen, whether it's a parish priest or it is a priest in a convent near you or a monastery near you, and you go and tell that priest, look, Father, would you mind being my spiritual director? I would like to have a priest who can speak to me about some of these issues that we are going to see right now. Then the question could come up, what's the difference between speaking to a lay person about my life, my ambitions, my failures, my miseries, my challenges, and on the other hand, speaking to the priest about the very same things? And to my mind, it's usually the difference between an accountant and an auditor, right? Spiritual direction with the priest, I would dare say, is almost like an auditor. With that friend of yours, that lay person could be like an accountant, but with a spiritual auditor is, sorry, with a priest is with a spiritual auditor. So this is the difference to me. So they look at the same set of accounts, but the auditor goes into depth about them. So what should I speak to the priest about in spiritual direction? Number one, your practices of piety, how are they going? Am I managing to go for Mass more than just Sunday? When was the last time I went for confession? Am I managing to read the Bible? Etc., etc. These are some of the things you can speak to him about. You can speak to him about, there's a whole list here, so at the end, as usual, we will share this on that WhatsApp group for Plan of Life, and you can go through it. But basically, other areas of your life that, you know, might be of interest there. But another one that I have found very useful personally, and I'll give you an example, even though we're running out of time, is sometimes there are moral dilemmas or challenges you are facing, or that somebody you advise is facing. And I'll give you a practical example. I had a friend of mine. to a campo, I was convinced this guy was addicted to sex. I was convinced. Umse bana, venye tumeongea hii story sijui kutoka lini, and we've tried everything, prayer, sacrament, confession, nini, bado. So when we finished campo, he started aliendeleza hizo tabia huko in Koinange. Okay, let me not say which street particularly, but he started looking for loose women around tuseme. So now I was like, my gosh, now imagine one of these women gets pregnant. Of course they're going to abort. No prostitute wants to get a baby. That messes your business. So in my head I was thinking, can I advise, as a Catholic, can I advise this friend of mine, look, if you cannot resist that temptation, at least use a condom. Because man, you're just going to make things worse. But then something in my head told me, how can one Catholic advise another Catholic to use a condom? It just sounds a bit off. So I decided, let me ask a priest. Now the closest priest to me was ordained like 6 months earlier. So like, guy, you know me, I could ask him some of these questions. I'm where me achana na story ya father Jew was ordained for. And I wanted to ask an older priest. But I asked this, look, I have a friend who's in this situation. He has difficulties in purity, tends to sleep around with women. Now he's doing it with loose women around. Can I advise him to use a condom? And the priest told me, at first he smiled, then he shook his head and he said, Ram, the church never advises you on how to sin. Kasema, we. Point home. That's why we need spiritual direction. Sometimes we are in this situation, maybe it's not you, maybe it's a friend, and I don't know what to tell him. Well, go consult somebody who knows, right? Another thing that helps is you can get confession. If you go for spiritual direction, you can also get confession. And then to finish, is this gentleman wrote a book that I hate reading, and one of the passages I completely hated reading was the following. However manly you are, however virtuous you are, because I'm punctual, I am industrious, I am honest, I'm sincere, I'm generous, I'm all of these wonderful virtues. However many of those virtues you have, never for one moment forget that if you die in mortal sin, meaning if I die without God's grace in my soul, you will go to hell with all your human virtues. So the most important thing is God's grace that we get in the sacraments. Right? Not my punctuality, not my order, not my generosity, it is God's grace. So in all of this plan of life and in all your accompaniment and spiritual direction and accountability partners, etc., the most important thing there is God's grace. Okay, so with that I finish. Asanteni sana.